Hello, everybody. My name in the SCA is Dame Sophia the Orange, and my real name is Lara Coutinho Dean. And I'm here to talk to you today about some serious emotional issues. It's how to help people resolve conflicts. And it's a pretty big topic. We have a lot to share, and I invite you to hold your questions if you can until the end. Hopefully, we'll have a nice Q&A session after after the content has been conveyed to you. The reason why I get into this is especially with folks in the SCA in leadership positions is because we do have a bully policy, and that bully policy does require that if people are in a conflict and then want to get assistance from officers of the organization, it has to start with those people in the conflict having at least one attempt to have a conversation with each other to work out that problem. And this is one decent way, I believe, could help. Now, I am not a lot of things. I am not a professional emotional growth specialist in any way. I have no certifications in emotional or mental health at all. What I do have is my entire adult life, going back over 30 years, where I've been working with some organizations that do focus on emotional growth work. So, just like we all have hobbies that we obsess over and we learn a lot about those particular topics, that's how I've gotten my wisdom and experience. And I do feel like I've got some good stuff to offer you. And please do go do your own research as well and um, find some great stuff out there that works for you. What I have to offer you today is one decent option that I think will help. And in particular, those of you that are serving as seneschals, you're going to get called upon to help in resolving conflicts between our community members. And I know all of you are people of service who want to help. And you also don't want to get drug into, people's broken hearts and problems on a deep level that you're not prepared to deal with. So what I'm hoping to do is give you this two uh, formats for having a conversation that could come up in your SCA life when you're trying to help folks deal with that bully policy we have, and also maybe has nothing to do with policy. It's just conflicts happening in your groups and someone's asked you to help. So I hope you can see my shared screen. Up at the top, I'm saying the purpose is to learn these two very basic techniques for resolving emotional conflicts between two people. It can be used with more than two people, but it's really intended to be just two people, A and B, having some sort of conflict that could be partially resolved, completely. I don't know. It really depends on so many factors, but these will help get some progress made. Now, sources include the Woman Within program. That's the main volunteer group I have been working with for over 30 years. Oh, we got some people coming in late. Okay. All right, we got Robin and Juliana that came in late. You guys are more than welcome. Thanks for being here. Just please keep your cameras off and questions at the end. And we are recording, so if you don't mind sticking around for being on the recording, thank you. And we're going to keep going. So the sources of where I get my my stuff from is womanwithin.org, and also a brother organization called Mankind Project, or mkp.org. And these organizations have been around since the mid 80s. My parents helped to form the local chapters in Indianapolis while we were growing up. And they still exist today and are amazing communities of people who are dedicated to helping each other grow in your emotional journeys and growing up. Um, so there's a lot that can happen. It is all entirely, by volunteers for volunteers, and there is a lot of training that goes into anybody leading the growth work. Also, a key book I hope everyone will read is called Crucial Conversations. And this one I got from my job when we had a really great class in just how to get along with your teammates. And this one has a wonderful set of guidance and wisdom lists. Please do read that. It's a very, very good book. And then the last one is a very quick, easy video. I hope you'll click on that and watch that video at some point on how to use the clearing model. Most of what I'm giving you is a simplified version of this clearing model. And when I say clearing, it's kind of like clearing the air. And this particular group, the Conscious Leadership Group, is full of great resources. So please do go take a look at that, see the webpage, and watch that video. Also, there's a nice list of workshops that I've taken with the Woman Within. So you might wonder, why should we pay attention to Lara, aka Sophie, that weirdo theater geek that does comedy and puppets? The reason why is because I've worked a lot of different ways to heal myself and my family as we've gone through a lot of challenges on the emotional level. So I'm feeling pretty good about the progress I and my family have made. So we just come from experience, and I'm happy to help. We've got a long list of caveats here, and I'm actually going to skip that and come back to it because I want to get down to the nitty gritty with you guys about what are these two methods that can help you to resolve conflicts, either between yourself and somebody else or when you're asked to be a moderator. In the SCA with the seneschals, this is going to happen to you guys. If it hasn't yet, I expect it will at some point. We have a lot of folks that get into various levels of conflict, and you're going to be called in at some point to help clear that up. So the first, I'm going to keep it down here. The first method I'm calling just checking it out. This deals with what was actually said, done, seen, experienced by two people. These two people probably have wildly different perspectives on what happened. When you ask somebody to tell their story about what happened that fateful day, they will most likely have something different than a second person and their second perspective. There is a lot to be accomplished by just comparing notes on what happened and what was said. I'll bet you anything that if you ask one person to start and tell as much detail as they can about what's the hard data, what movements happen, what words were said, what dishes were broken, what food was thrown into the garbage, what happened, without the emotional interpretation, you may find that two people come to understand what happened and the conflict can be reduced because of that. It can be really hard to say the door opened and you said the words back off without also adding in one's own interpretation, like you screamed or you yelled like the building was on fire. There's all sorts of interpretations we can add. And the key to this particular technique is removing those judgments and interpretations and sticking to the facts. When you do that, you can often clear up a lot about what happened, and it might lead to an easy apology to say, I didn't mean to scream like the building was on fire. So sorry about that. So this is one step. This is just one thing, checking it out with each other, saying what happened from 2 points of view. This is actually the first step in the next method. So sometimes all you have to do is check out the data and then it's over. Great. Let's go on to the second method. This is what happens when you get deeper and you're trying to really move past this difficult piece. This is a clearing conversation. It has 4 steps, and I use an acronym that I learned from the Woman Within program, and we use it for a million different things because it covers um, physical, intellectual, emotional, and what do you need deep in your heart. So the first step, P, is physical. What are the facts? What actually happened? It's what we were just talking about, and you can do this in a few different ways. Sometimes telling the story is enough, however the person wants to. You can also add some guidance. If I were to say, what did Bob and I go through in a particular in a particular moment, I could paraphrase what Bob said, or I could say exactly the same words, and it's going to be different for different people. I personally love to hear somebody speak back to me just like a parrot, exactly the words that came out of my mouth. I really like that. From my point of view, if I am hearing another person reflect back to me exactly what the words were precisely that I spoke, then I believe they really heard what I was saying. However, that might not work for another person. Another person just might say they really want to, hear what the person was interpreting and feeling and, getting into a real understanding of what was said. So I encourage you to choose one or the other. Either say, we're going to parrot and reflect back exactly what was said, or paraphrase. And either way, you're going to be taking the emotion out of the conveyance of hard data. What were the words that were said? What were the actions that happened? You can imagine that if a security camera were on the ceiling recording what happened, how would you describe what the camera saw? So a camera is not going to interpret that as somebody screaming like the building's on fire. It is rather what happened, who moved where, what, when. Now, the next step, intellectual. This is what you know about what happened. You know some things were said, you know some things were done, and this is not emotional, but what you know about the situation. For maybe something like, I know we were all in a hurry to clean up the event site. I know we were under time pressure. Or I know it was cold and we were all outside and all of us were experiencing stress because nobody had a coat on and we were caught outside. So intellectual things like that. I also have an optional sentence that I'm going to come back to. So you can read it and think about it, but I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The third step is emotional. This is where you honor the real emotions, no matter what they are for a person. Your personal emotions, everybody else's, they are real for whoever's experiencing them. And the key piece of this moment in the discussion is to be honest with oneself and honest with the people you're working with. What were your feelings? It's very important to own up to what your feelings were, because when you do that, you start to be a little vulnerable, and that's where trust is built. So if I were to say, I was so angry when you opened up the door and you were screaming, I was offended. Like, why would you come in here? We're all working and trying to get cleaned up. Why would you yell? So I was offended and I was angry. What I might also do is take a minute to think, what else am I feeling? I'm afraid. I have fear coming up for me because when I was a kid and somebody yelled like that, something was really wrong and I had to pay attention and it was a scary situation. So allowing all of the emotions to come up and say, this is what I'm feeling, and not have judgment be a part of it, but simply honoring this is what's going on for me. And this is going to happen for both people. Let that be, keep judgment out of it. Now, here's another little piece of advice that I really like to come back to. Sometimes those feeling words can be hard to nail down. There's so many different ones out there. If you do a Google for emotions wheel, you're going to see a whole lot of beautiful graphics with thousands of words that describe our feelings. And I believe they can be boiled down to five. There are kind of five core feelings that we all have in common. And if you can boil it down to one of these five, that's great. I mean, they all have cousins, okay? You definitely consider the cousins to these guys. But if you can boil down what you're feeling down to these five, you're going to help simplify the conversation. So, mad, glad, sad, afraid, and ashamed are the five that I like to use. If you can boil it down to that, that's awesome. There's another one out there that people like to use in this scenario, and that's the word hurt. But I suggest you don't bring that in because that implies something from another person. So if you've got someone who's tempted to say, I felt hurt, well, dig a little deeper and you might see fear and sadness under there. Hurt is okay, but it usually means something deeper is still underneath. Now, the last step, spiritual. Spiritual means what do you need deep in your heart to let go and move on? Sometimes it's as simple as I just need to be heard. I need you to hear what was going on for me, and I don't care what you do with it, but I need you to know that it was a terrifying experience for me. And thank you for listening. That could be it. Or you might need an apology. You might need the other person to say, yeah, I get it, and I'm sorry. So it can go anywhere. And really, the tough part is self evaluating what do you need to really let go and move on. Sometimes that can also be boundary setting. Thanks for listening to me, but I want you to know I'm never going to work on an event staff with you again. Okay, that can be a boundary somebody sets. There's all sorts of things you can ask for, and be prepared for the answer to be no. But when the answer is yes, it can be really, really good. Now let's go back to that optional sentence. This is a layer deeper than I normally ask SCA people to go. But if you'd like to, here's an opportunity to go a little deeper because it can resolve some stress in a person's mind about what's going on for themselves. The sentence is the story I tell myself about myself is this. This is where judgment bubbles up and your own fear of judgment from someone else can show up. And if it is shared in a safe space, it can be a vulnerable moment and you can see the opening from someone else, and that can build trust and it can build empathy. So if you're willing to take that risk and share that, it could happen. That's really, up to the people involved. Sometimes in SCA environments, we're not really in a good emotionally safe space and we're not ready to take it that far. However, I offer it to you as something you could try, either for yourself or as a moderator. You could offer this as an opportunity. For this little scenario I'm using as an example, I might say the story I tell myself about myself is that Bob yelled and I'm a little girl that doesn't pay attention, and so I'm going to get into trouble, and I don't know what I'm doing in this kind of a situation. But if I think about it, I'm a grown up and I can listen to somebody yelling and not panic and understand that they are having their own emotions. So I'll just take a pause and listen to what Bob has to say. And I don't have to worry about the story I'm telling myself about being a little girl. So the story I tell myself about myself is all one person's emotional growth work. You might choose to bring that in or not. Now, the end result is that you should be able to make a fill in the blank sentence. When this happened, when Bob came in the door and screamed, "What are you doing?" I know about it that we were cleaning up the kitchen and we were under time pressure and it was late and we were all working very hard. What I feel about it is I feel anger and sadness, and I felt some fear come up for me. And what I want to ask of you is this, and let's assume I'm talking to Bob. What I want to ask from you is this, Bob, and then I can move on from this conflict. I want you to know that you were scary to me in that moment. And if you could move forward, knowing that when you're in that place and you yell, I'm going to be a scared person when you do that. I'll try to get better myself, but if you could please know that that happens and consider doing it differently the next time, then I could move on from this and we'd be okay. So that's just an example. Um, when you are doing this yourself or when you are operating as a moderator, it's really, really good to ask the other person to repeat back. This is active listening. I'm hoping maybe you guys have heard of active listening. It's when somebody says something and then who you're talking to repeats it back for the sake of clarity and understanding what happened, what was said. So the the two options I was giving you earlier, either parrot back and say exactly the same words again, or paraphrase, and show that there is some interpretation and brain work going on. Let's see. After one person has said the fill in the blank sentence, it is a really good idea to sit quietly before the other person responds. Believe it or not, this is a magic moment because pulses and heart rates can get heightened and fear can come in the room. And when you take some deep breaths in this moment and let calmness and breathing be the thing that you're focusing on, uh, it'll help each person react from a more grounded place. So the second person in the clearing has a chance to say whatever their response is to the request. That should come first. Does that request sit well enough with the person that they can say yes, or are they going to say no? And then you have another opportunity to do the same process with the second person, but that is a choice. The first person making the clearing might say, "This is enough, and I really do not want to move forward at all. I have said my piece. They've heard me. That's what I need, and that's enough. And I don't want to do anything else." That's fine. That's a great option. If the second person and the first person agree that moving on to allow the second person to do a clearing sentence in the same way, you can, but both have to agree that they're going to move on to that second person. Um, and of course, then person one is giving their decision about whether or not they're going to be able to grant the request of person two in the end. When it works out really well, both people come to some sort of better understanding, and they may be able to say, yes, I will be able to give you this thing that you're asking for. Often it is being heard, offering an apology. Sometimes it just stops there where you cannot move forward. Um, when that happens, we have done as much as we can in the moment And it's perfectly fine to let it sit and say, we've achieved what we came here to do today. And that's enough for now. And let's break and go to our corners and maybe go home and have a nap. Um, when it works out, it's great. And when it doesn't work, maybe it didn't work that day, but giving it some time will. And sometimes that time means that these two people are going to develop boundaries and they're going to figure it out on their own, and they're not going to necessarily resolve and leave it behind, but at least they may not continue to put energy into that particular conflict. They may not play well together, but they're not going to poison the rest of your SCA group by continuing a nasty sort of cat fight over years and, become the Hatfields and the McCoys. No. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause at this point, and I'll take a pause and open for questions. If you want to, you can put them in the chat, or you can turn on your mic, remembering that we're recording. And the next step is I'm going to talk about serving as a moderator in this kind of a scenario. So I will take a pause and drink from my cocoa. If anybody has a question. Robin Clune has a question. Robin, you're welcome to use your mic if you want, or type it in the chat box.
I will go ahead and use my mic. I'm also Katya, which somehow it got switched today while I was in classes. When you talk about the people I'm not sure confronting is the right word, but
Clearing,
together.
clearing up with each other.
Yes, thank you. My experience in the SCA is that one person comes to you and says, oh my God, did you blah, 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 blah. And it's harder to get them together. How do you get them in the same place? I've got somebody in my current barony. Well, I've got two people in my current barony who won't be in the same space together. And they haven't been as long as I've been here actively playing over a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Honestly, sometimes that's okay, because the SCA is open to the public, and the entire public is full of wild, wacky, different kinds of people. And sometimes, if the boundary that they have found is we're just not going to be in the same room with each other, but that's how they continue to operate in the same SCA group, maybe that's okay. So let me give you that option. Maybe doing nothing is going to be all right. Now, the purpose of clearing between people can either come from these two individuals, one of the two individuals. And if someone comes to you as a seneschal and says, I got a problem with Bob, and you, as the seneschal, says, I can help a little, I can offer to have this, help you have this conversation to clear it up. And this is what it would look like. But then those two people have to decide together that they're going to have this conversation. It really cannot work if it's one person forcing another to have a conversation they don't want to have. It's not going to work if it's just one-sided. So also another thing is, as a seneschal or even just a friend in the same group, I would not recommend putting um, your own feelings and judgment into their conflict. Because if their own conflict makes you uncomfortable, that's your own emotional work to do. And that's your work to do with your counselor, your journal, your teddy bear, your friends, however you do that. So if it makes you uncomfortable watching these two people, then I would suggest that's something you need to deal with on your own, separately from them. And if you're friends with them, maybe you develop in your friendship with them an opportunity to do some work with them. But you cannot force these two people to come together. Now, that might not be great, but Katya, how do you feel about that? Is that at least a reasonable answer to your question?
It's an answer. And, I had no answer. So now I have an answer. That's fine. I
Yeah,
do wonder, how long can you wait to get the two of them together before it is less useful?
it's never too late to apologize, and it's never too late to try to heal relationships. So, sometimes people do this stuff on their deathbeds, and I'm sorry, but it's real. They regret a conflict they had with somebody 20, 30 years ago, and they're saying, gosh, I wish I could talk to them. And if I did, I would say this, blah, blah, blah. And then they free their souls and hope that the message gets back to that person. So I'd say you can wait as long as is necessary. And sometimes people do go through their own emotional growth that you don't know about. So what I would do in your position really is I would check in with them, ask them how they're doing, and tell each of them you have these little tiny baby tools that you saw in a class in the SCA. And you said, maybe this is something that could help. You can't force them to do anything, but you can offer help.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay, let's not take too much time, but Bronwyn, what can I do for you?
Yes, in your process, why do you give the second, why is it not assumed that the second person will go through the same process?
Because if the first person gets everything that they need and they say, I'm done, then it's not a good idea to continue, because then that person has said, I'm finished and I want to move on. If they say no, I don't want to move on with more work, then it would do more damage than good. However, what I would suggest is let it sit for a day. And if the second person is saying, I still need to be heard, then that's their work, and come back and ask for a second conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. You can always do more of these. You can have 20 of them. But handling them one step at a time allows a person to do their own settling in and emotional work in between those conversations. If they insist on having them all at once, you could try that, but make sure that both people are okay with it and both people agree. I'm going to tell you, I have been in the position of forcing too many of these conversations to happen on top of each other. And it was a bad time. It was not quite 10 years ago. And I felt really nervous about getting these conversations done. And it did more damage than it did good. So I'm learning from my own experience. I'm passing on to you. It's hard to tell sometimes, but ask them. Ask who's
Okay.
involved. Ask yourself, ask them, and give yourself time.
Okay.
Super. All right, my friends, I've got my friend here, Baron Gerard. Gerard helped me out years ago being the moderator in one of these conversations that I was having with another friend. And he was great. I didn't even train him. And I was like, how'd you learn to do that? He was super. So Gerard did this with me and another friend a bunch of years ago, and we had a good talk, and I put some of our notes from our talk into this handout. I'm going to breeze through them real quick, and then I'm going to ask Gerard to add some wisdom to that. So first of all, it's a good idea as a moderator, especially if you are the seneschal and you're roped in to do this as part of your SCA responsibilities, start with figuring out your purpose and goals, and start with do no harm. Try to not make it worse. Basically, going in with best of intentions is good. Plan as much as you can, maybe do some pre-work. Try to do no harm, don't make it worse. You are there to facilitate the discussion, not to get involved. Also, you're there to witness. Sometimes just witnessing and watching what's happening and saying, I hear you, is a big help. You're there to support both individuals. When you're a seneschal or a friend trying to help two people, it's about them and you helping them. Our SCA community benefits, because then the more individuals we have working closer together, the better we can get at being teams that produce good things together. And when we split up into these judgment clubs, where like, nyeh, 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 when we do that split up in these different judgment clubs, then it just, hinders everything. Some tasks to focus on are do some pre-work, and that means individually talking to each separate person, making sure as the moderator you understand that both of them are agreeing to have this conversation. and then move on. Monitoring time is really important because it is so easy to just let it go and go and go and go, and allowing some brain power to helping both people get equal time is definitely your job as the moderator. Taking notes is really important, even if you're recording it. During the one that we worked on, both me and the other person, we both recorded it on our own phones, and then Gerard took his own notes. Those were all helpful. And if the two people want to have any rules of engagement, decide what they are and enforce them, like no yelling. If you want to have a rule that says we're not going to yell at each other here in this coffee shop in the middle of God and everybody, then you are there to enforce that and say, shh, let's keep our voices down. Here are just some tips. Empower these individuals to make choices. Don't necessarily tell them what to do. So if they're feeling tired, ask them, do you want to continue with this work? Or would you like something else? Postponing, doing it in 2 or 3 different visits options. Asking them questions is really important. There's a special one I like to ask, which is, what do you need to feel heard? I got to tell you, once I asked my mother this, and it was a bad response. What my mother needed and what I needed to feel heard was 2 completely different things. So I know when I need to feel heard, I want to hear somebody else say exactly every single word that I said. And that's me. And I've asked myself that question a lot. Some people have never asked themselves, what do they need to really feel heard? So it's a good one to try. Active listening, very important. Keep your own emotions contained. Your emotions as a moderator are important. I love you for them, and keep them out of this conversation. When you acknowledge their emotions, I see your tears, I hear you're upset, I get it. That's very powerful for you to just witness and be compassionate. And, take all the time it's needed. Don't rush it. And then this last one is super handy. My personal life coach uses this all the time. It's the acronym of HALTS. You're not going to get a lot of emotional work done when you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or sick. And gosh, where does that happen a lot? When you're hungry and tired and sick. Oh, I don't know, maybe Penzig. Uh, that happens to me a lot. So it's not a great idea to try to do a lot of deep emotional work at Penzig. So that's the basics. And I would love people to be introduced to the magnificent Gerard and ask you for your wisdom.
Yeah. So, and hopefully you can hear me good. Just if people come to you and ask, hey, can you moderate a discussion between us, or you like, take that as an honor, right? That's 2 people that know you well enough that are saying, hey, I trust you to be a, impartial third party here to, help us get over that. Ask yourself if you're a good person to do that for any number of reasons. Maybe you're in a household, with someone, or, the web of household alliances or whatever is a thing. I do suggest, if you are a seneschal, likely this could fall to you. I've been a landed baron before, and that's probably that may or may not be a good person. A landed baron a lot of times, or baroness, has other things, and something going right or wrong here might be really bad for that office, right? So think about the offices you're in, and what is a good spot there. But also try not to just dump it back to them and say, well, I'm not a good person, so tough. Try and help them find a better person. I know Master Kean's on here as the Kingdom Seneschal, and worst comes to worst, go to him, and then maybe he'll divvy it back down to somebody else. So that's important. I always like to try in the pre-work of things, come up with, hey, some things that are just a showstopper for you. This is not, you're not a therapist, you're not being paid to do this work. So just keep that in mind. Like, hey, if someone gets really rough or whatever, I have to walk away, and that's okay. We're not here to harm other people. Like you said, do no harm at the top. And try to ask people what their, what's the a good and a bad, what's the minimum outcome that they're looking for, but also ask them what's the best possible outcome in the world, right? And then a lot of times if you ask those two people independently, what's the best possible outcome in the world, right? You might find a lot of overlap, and then ask them for one step below that. Go, hey, if the minimum is a 1 and the best possible thing in the world is a 10, next thing down maybe an 8 or a 9, what's that? And I bet you in the Venn diagram of the problem and the solutions, you're going to find a lot of overlap, because when people start talking about the best things, they start talking about joint goals. They start talking about the barony being better off, or the kingdom being better off, or the guild being better off for it. And so that's where they actually start to align. It's where you can kind of help guide them there. But just that, and keep in the back of your mind, you're not a judge. You're not here to be a finder of fact. You're here to, and you're not a, we use the word moderator. Don't think about it like in like a presidential debate moderator. You're not there as a journalist trying to like get one side or the other or whatnot. Don't get into that. You're there to like have the two sides speak equitably, right? One person might speak more than the other, but make sure they both feel equally heard. And then make sure that they can then, find their own resolution where they agree to, I'm going to respect your boundaries on this, and I will do this in order to make sure this doesn't happen again. They will come to their agreement, and then hopefully, honestly, you really shouldn't have to hold them to it, right? Because if it works right, they'll go ahead and do it themselves. You're not there to be the police officer in the long run to be like, I see you are in the same room as this person. No, like don't get into that, right? When the discussion's over, your duties are done. So I can ask you any questions there as well. Feel free to.
Anybody got questions for Gerard and his amazing experience saving people? Robin Clune.
Yeah.
I think.
Hi. I'm not sure this is a question either of you can answer.
We'll make something up.
As I mentioned, I have been playing actively in Atlantia for a little over a year. However, I have substantial years in the SCA, and I've been a little surprised. Personally, as I have gone to various events and things, everyone has been welcoming and warm and lovely, and I have been just really impressed and pleased. But at the same time, casually chatting with people, I've heard from Marinus, Pontialto, a couple of other baronies, individuals from those baronies. At this point, I think it might be all of them. I'm not sure. Where they say, yeah, I'd rather hang out with you guys because there's too much politics in my barony. And I know after a long time, there's going to be history, but is there anything that we could do to heal the whole group and get them to stop holding grudges against each other? Not barony to barony, but groups within the baronies.
Groups within the baronies, yeah, and that's rough because it's I was an only child, but I imagine sibling relationships can be like that, right? It's like you live with this person, you're stuck with them for like 18 years, and then they keep showing up at every important holiday ever for the rest of your life, and then you're like, I'm just I remember when we were 5 and you took my GI Joe and that kind of thing.
Yes.
The thing I always tell people is I forget where I got this quote, but hating someone is like drinking poison hoping someone else will die, right? Everyone holding a grudge is basically keeping some portion of their brain active on somebody else that they probably don't care about you, right? A lot of times these grudges are way one-sided, and so it's up to everybody to really just look at themselves and say, like, what am I spending my time and effort on? And if so and so was mean to me at an event 10 years ago, like, does anyone really remember it correctly? Probably not. Does that person remember it? No. If need be, I'd say go bring it up, see if you can find yourself a way to an apology and move on with your life, because it's just causing you your own, it's upping your stress. I don't need that bringing my blood pressure up. So yeah, that's and it's gonna have to happen individually. person by person by person.
A big
Yeah,
job.
That's
see, that's what
yeah,
that's what I was gonna say, Gerard. You're right.
yeah.
It is not possible to take a group and heal the group without first individuals building the trust in between individuals. So, what we are doing to fix your problem is right now, you're all here taking a class in how to resolve conflicts a little better than what you did yesterday. And when you practice, do it with a friend. Practice this very sentence. When this happened, I knew this about it and I feel this about it. And what I want in the future is this. And it could be as little as like your husband stole a French fry from your table. Practice this. And I can tell you, if we can build a community where each individual person is feeling confident in their ability to say what's up, ask for what they need, and then be safe no matter what the answer is, saying yes or no. I'm going to hold a boundary, or I'm going to build more vulnerability and trust with you. If we can build those skills for individuals one at a time, then the community heals and gets better. And then we can build an expectation within the group of people that we will deal with this stuff instead of bury it. And I tell you, this is my mission in life. I don't know if you can tell, I'm passionate about this. Um, Teaching this, sharing it with your friends, trying it out with people on a small scale. Like when something little happens, do a clearing conversation, practice. And then when something big comes in and, somebody threw out your favorite potato salad, then you can really have that conversation. I promise you, the more you practice this, the more comfortable it will be and the easier it is for you to share with your community. So that's my preachy bit. Thank you for listening.
Dame, if I may.
Bronwyn, yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So Gerard mentioned something. We inadvertently do this in rugby because rugby is so passionate.
I
You're,
love
you're on,
rugby. You play
right.
rugby, we got to talk after.
And he said something about wanting the best outcome. And when I came into the SCA, as you know, you get a lot of, we don't do this and we don't do that. So in a situation in rugby, we have a team that we have a blood feud with 20 years. But the rules of rugby are that we are barbarians on the field and we are gentlemen off the field. And so the game ended and they're across the field and we're the host. And I'm like, how come nobody's delivering food? How come that? And in mass got this, well, we have this. No, we are off the field. So I picked up beers and I picked up food and I walked across the field. You interact with your same mate. So I'm a prop. I went and found their prop.
Yeah.
And I said, thanks for a great game. I'm new to the team, but I understand we have a long history, but we're off the field now. So when I started getting this in the SCA, we don't do this. We don't hang with them. No. First of all, a woman and a lesbian, I'm already a double minority. I need to find my tribe. And so I just go, you know what? What's the best way that I could present the SCA to somebody? And I take my little bottle of whatever I've got and I take some food. And if everybody wants to stand over there, I find somebody in that group that I can connect with. And that's how I'm doing it personally. I don't care that we don't talk to them because 10 years ago, their tents blew on our site. And that's how I do it every day is what do I want the best outcome to be? And I try to be that outcome. This is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Bronwyn. Yeah, and please
one
hang
thing
out
if I can,
after because I love rugby.
yeah, awesome. I was just gonna say, one thing that we've been doing. So I'm the seneschal of Kapellenberg, which is a canton of Windmaster's Hill, and my entire SCA career has been in Kapellenberg. And after every meeting, we all go out to dinner, or most people go out to dinner after the meeting, right? But we will not. We will always sit at one big table. We will not split into little groups.
Right. Right.
And it's there's no assigned seats, so you might sit next to somebody this week and not that week or whatever. And it really helps, I think, keep that, like, I can't be too much of a jerk to somebody because I might have to sit next to them at dinner for like coming up. And it means that we're really picky about restaurants because we need to find a restaurant that's going to stay open late, can handle 12, 15 people, separate checks and one big, and it's a big mess. But I think it really helps just keep the group kind of going. And I encourage that for anyone else out there. The previous person was wondering about how do you help heal. Like, make everyone go eat dinner together. It probably will. A lot of this stuff will sort out.
And practice. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how important it is. Every single day, practice yourself. Practice with your friends. Practice over tiny things or imaginary things, and just do it a lot. It's like every skill we have in the SCA. You learn it, you practice, you share with your friends, you teach a class at university, and it goes on and on and on. Now, I want to just take a tiny moment to introduce my new page that I've never done before. This is brand new. This is because a lot of people have talked about apologies, especially recently. There was an apology somebody did in court not too long ago, and it was awkward. And I want to address that with a brand new acronym I have come up with. And it was very much based on some stuff Gerard taught me. So, apologies. We have this acronym called HERO. Be a hero. 1, humility. Say you're sorry. Say, I regret what I did. That's the crux of it. Start with that. The next one is explain, but not explain what you did. I'm sorry, Gerard.
Well, I was gonna say, be explicit about what you understood you did, right? Be very clear what you're apologizing for.
Yes.
So,
because if you think you're apologizing for closing the door in somebody's face, and they're like, I don't really care about the door, I cared about my potato salad that you threw out, then you got to start out with really being clear. So I am sorry I threw out your potato salad. Explaining how you are going to avoid this in the future. And sometimes this is tough because I know for me, it took a lot for me to learn, what do I need to do to remember to not make that mistake? Do I need a world full of Post-it notes? Apparently I do. I do need a world full of Post-it notes, but I have coping techniques I've learned as I grow up. What are you going to do to avoid the mistake? Not explaining what you did and like, well, I just threw out your potato salad because it stank. The next one is review your own internal shift. Do the gut check. And this is not part of the conversation with the other person. This is your gut check. Like, can you commit to this, not throwing out potato salad again in the future? And then the last is offer. Offer to make amends. Some of you may have heard of the 12-step program, and there's a step in there called making amends. And it's powerful to offer a thing from yourself, to say, I would like to give something of myself to you because I am sad that I caused you some damage. And that can be really beautiful. Now, another couple of things are apologize as loud as you fart. This was my sister's favorite elevation vigil advice that she got. And we've used it in many contexts. I highly recommend it because it asks the apology to be in the same environment as the mistake was made in the first place. It's good to say apologize to the actual person that you wronged, not another representative. Or if they're in a group, like the whole group, I'm apologizing to this big group, but then like the actual person that you had the conflict with doesn't really get the apology. It's awkward. Also, don't take drugs right before you apologize. Because my feeling is that makes you numb and you're not really feeling the apology, and so it kind of numbs out everything that you're saying. And what the wronged person needs to heal is law for them. That's what they need. And if you're not able to give it to them, then that's a different problem. But what a person needs for healing, it's only up to them to decide. And then this last one's my favorite. It is never too late to apologize. Never.